Hey guys, Emma here at the Vlog Lady, and today I'm finally ready to talk about episodes 17 and 18 of Twin Peaks: The Return. I have to be honest, after watching the finale I felt profoundly disturbed and depressed. And for about 24 hours I felt like I'd been the victim of a terrible tragedy. Although I now believe that the show and the ending can be interpreted in a million different ways, I do feel that the way the last episode, and particularly the last segments, were set up and crafted, that was done in a way to make viewers feel as forlorn and as discombobulated as possible. Discombobulated. Ultimately though, I think we'll all interpret this show in different ways, and I think every interpretation will be valid. It actually feels like in this season they gave us just a few pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and it was up to us to put the rest of the puzzle together, using our imaginations and our dreams and our hopes. Over the past couple of days I found myself questioning my own morality. I kept asking myself, like, why do you like Fire Walk with Me? Why do you feel uneasy about season 1 and season 2 possibly being retconned if it means that an innocent girl will be saved and the forces of evil, including Bob, Judy and all of the rest of them, can be defeated? What happens at the end of The Return basically made me spiral into a session of self-analysis where I had to question my very nature, where I had to think about the qualities and the purpose of art, where I had to reposition what Twin Peaks means to me as a fan and as a human being. At the end of the day, no matter what my interpretation is of the show now, and I honestly don't think that I will ever settle on just one interpretation or meaning, I do feel that this was very, very powerful stuff. So it's been a couple of days since I watched part 17 and 18, and I feel a little bit differently now than I did immediately after watching. I don't feel as depressed, but I still feel like the way the show wrapped up was very bleak. In fact, I would go so far as to say that it possibly felt like the bleakest ending to a David Lynch production that I've ever seen. And that's saying something, considering the endings of like Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway. That's not what I expected, to be honest, especially since Mark Frost was going to be involved, and also the fact that the original Twin Peaks seemed to balance the darkness with pine weasel moments, curious llamas, silly banter, cherry pies and all the rest. And I guess you could argue that this season gave us as many of those silly moments as it did darkness, but for me personally, I think that the balance was heavily slanted towards this season feeling horror-laden and inexplicable. And I know that some people actually prefer that, but I prefer darkness and light together, I guess. For instance, where did we end up with all the characters that we knew and loved from the original show? In the last reality that we saw them in, only a few of them seemed to have a happy ending, and some of them had a very little screen time during the entire run. I found this quite disappointing and quite sad, despite the fact that any sadness or tragedy might have been obliterated by their timeline changing due to Agent Cooper's actions. There was a lot I liked in the last 2 episodes and a lot I didn't like. One of the major things I didn't like, and you will probably know this if you've seen my reaction videos, was Diane. I did have a big problem with the Diane character, unfortunately. I knew as soon as Laura Dern was cast for the role of Diane that Lynch would pair her with Cooper. And that made sense given the chemistry of the actors involved. After them being in Blue Velvet together, that was an amazing movie and you could really feel the chemistry there. However, I did have a niggling feeling in me that Lynch would overuse the Laura Dern character. It would possibly detract from the Twin Peaks story that I already knew and loved. Ultimately, I feel that that's what happened a little bit for me anyway. I know that some people love the Diane character and they don't have a problem with it, but I wasn't feeling that connection with Dale and Diane. I thought the sex scene in part 18 was overdone. I've seen some theories that Diane is actually the dreamer, dreaming all of this, and I have a problem with that. I just struggle with the idea of that. And I also struggle with how the relationship with Diane has changed Dale Cooper as a character as well. I found episode 17 very fulfilling. Firstly, it appeared that the tree of the arm was located at the entrance to the White Lodge, and I don't think this had been there before. This and the fact that Bad Coop allowed himself to be taken up into the portal was confusing to me, and I can't explain these things yet. I loved that the head of Major Briggs was there with the giant. To me, it seems like Major Briggs had become this higher life force and that he was acting as a sentinel for the good side. It seemed like a logical journey and ending for that character. I was terrified by the scene with Bob. It was horrific, and I liked that he was ultimately destroyed, it seemed. But I found myself questioning why it was Freddy who was used as the superhero character in that scene, when there were so many great candidates from the original Twin Peaks cast of characters that could have assumed that role. Wouldn't it have been nice just to see Nadine's super strength return for just that one scene, for instance? Or was Freddy's part in this a reminder that youth ultimately assumes the power and glory from an aging society? It felt slightly anticlimactic that the doppelganger was removed so easily. I say removed because we saw the ring return to the Black Lodge, but not the body of the doppelganger. I have to assume he did die, but I think there is scope to theorise differently too. It was a little bit disappointing that Agent Cooper had so little interaction with any of the original Twin Peaks characters, and I couldn't help but think as I was watching that Frank's role had obviously been written for Michael Ontkean's character and changed at the last moment. Regardless, I loved Robert Forster's role, and I found myself wanting to know more about his character and wanting to know more about his life. I loved Lucy's moment of glory in the scenario and James's protective behaviour over Nado. That gave great value to his character, I think. And I thought it was perfect that some of the best characters that were created in this season were present at the moment. The Mitchum brothers, plus Candy and the entourage. And then everything went kind of wonky. What happened? I've heard lots of theories and thoughts in the past couple of days, and one is that Agent Cooper's face froze at the moment we were supposed to realise that it was him that was dreaming. But for me, my interpretation of it is that at this moment Cooper had decided he was already going to save Laura, and because he'd made that decision, they were thrust into a moment that was outside of time. Much like in the moment when Philip Jeffries visits the FBI headquarters. When Cooper said we live inside a dream, it was because where they were at that particular moment was outside of their timeline, was outside of any reality that existed. Whatever world created by Cooper's decision to save Laura was where they were in that moment, according to my interpretation anyway. The Philip Jeffries moment was barely remembered by Cole and Albert, and emerged to them as if they were remembering scenes from their own dreams. And I felt like in the instant when the world around the characters at the sheriff's station was going dark, that this moment was that 1 second when Cooper had decided that he was going to save Laura, and thus the timeline was already beginning to dissolve. I think that Cooper might have already intuitively known where he could find Judy by going to the day that Laura was killed. We learned from Gordon that Coop already had knowledge about Judy, and I guess that explains his shocked reaction to Philip Jeffries' comment about Judy in Fire Walk With Me. Cooper's ability to know and sense things has obviously taken a giant leap since his time spent in the lodge, and he seems to preempt Jeffries in their discussion about Judy whilst they are in the motel in the convenience store place. Cooper's last comment before he goes through the door at the Grave Northern is chilling yet hopeful. I've seen theories suggesting that his comment, "See you at the curtain call," means that all of this is playing out as a televised event and all the characters are fictional. I mean, that is definitely true, but that Cooper's comment means that there is an awareness of their fictional status. For me, I see Cooper's comment as a last call to arms from a hero. He suggests that somehow they will reach the end and that they'll be together and take their bow, having successfully acted out their mission. I also think that his comment could refer to the fact that the timeline he is leaving behind is one that has been skewed and interfered with by Judy, Bob, the doppelganger and all of the other forces of evil, and that the true performance or true life is one that would be free of all this. I was astounded by the footage from Fire Walk With Me and the way it was used in these last two episodes. That scene with Laura and James felt so raw and real without the romanticized music behind it. Again, this suited this season so well, I think, because it was closer to a sense of real horror as opposed to fictionalized horror. It was incredibly clever to insert Cooper into that scene and have the moment where Laura screamed be him in the woods. I love the idea that he could intercept Laura before she was killed, but what actually happened? Cooper appeared to be there to save Laura and to eliminate Judy. Could he do both? I think what happens next is wide open to interpretation. Did Laura disappear or did Coop? I'm leaning towards the idea that Coop actually disappears at that moment, having successfully saved Laura. Thus, his own existence in that timeline or that time loop is negated, and therefore he must be transferred to somewhere else. We hear the noise from the gramophone right before Laura disappears, and to me the sound almost sounds like a tape being rewound, so I'm wondering if that correlates with the idea of a timeline being erased or rewound. The giant said it is in our house now, and I don't think he was talking about a person like Laura or an entity like Judy, but perhaps to the entire timeline after Coop has saved Laura. I want to think that the giant means that goodness reigns in the new timeline. The scene with Sarah Palmer smashing Laura's picture into pieces is what I feel is the last scene from that original timeline that we see in season 3. I think it's Judy or the mother figure inside of Sarah Palmer who is inhabiting Sarah Palmer, who is smashing this picture and who is now seemingly in pain and dying, making those horrific screaming noises, and very angry at Laura for thwarting her negative energy and for thwarting her plans. But then what happens to Cooper? He emerges from Glastonbury Grove this time to meet Diane, who is seemingly the same one he just left at the Great Northern Door. Is that what he meant by see you at the curtain call? The curtains of the Black Lodge? Is this the same timeline? Or is she a different Diane? I have no clue, and I have no idea what Diane and Dale do next. It appears that Cooper knows that they can move into another dimension by passing through what seems to be an electrical current. Once through this portal, Cooper seems to change slightly. He doesn't seem himself fully. When he has sex with Diane in the motel, he is expressionless, and she appears distraught as well. The note that Dale finds in the morning suggests that Diane and Dale are different characters. But Dale still knows that he is not Richard, although Diane may not know that she is not Linda. The influences of evil seem to be scattered around this dimension, just as in the Las Vegas setting, all the place names and colours and everything were connected to the Black Lodge. Here we have Judy's cafe, and Dale instinctively knows that Laura is nearby. Carrie Page's, or Laura's house, is marked with reminders that she is still connected to the evil of the lodge. The white horse on the mantle and the murdered man who looks a little like Doppelganger after he's been killed and Bob has emerged from his body. I find the conversation between Carrie and Cooper very interesting as they're driving towards Twin Peaks. She says that she tried to keep a clean house but that she was too young to know any better, and the phrase reminds me of the giant's term about something being in our house now. The Palmer house is then the focus of everything. It's where the giant and Major Briggs were watching on that big screen. I believe they were watching the Palmer house because they knew that Judy was there. That had been Major Briggs's mission. When it's revealed that the Chalfonts and Tremans have occupied the house, it seems to be a desolate ending. And I certainly read it that way initially. It seems like Laura and Dale have found themselves trapped in a alternative dimension that is bleak and soulless, and that they are destined to never get home again. Cooper seems to try and open the curtains of a non-existent lodge whilst asking what year it is. Is this the right question? Or should it rather be, what world is this, or whose dream is this? Is Laura dreaming, or is it a parallel world? Laura, or Carrie, hears Sarah Palmer calling from the morning after Laura was killed, and Laura or Carrie screams, and the last we see of Dale is him having a look of abject terror on his face. The Palmer house then flickers, and every room which seems to be alight with electricity seems to be obliterated by the power and force of Laura's scream. Or perhaps this is the moment that Laura in the original timeline is awakening and this is in fact a dream. This to me is a more hopeful interpretation of the scene and one that I prefer, but I feel that everything that we are shown in the scene is intended to cause us as viewers pain, confusion or fear. So I have a bit of doubt that the events are supposed to be interpreted in a positive way. Is this world where Laura and Cooper are trapped? The last dreamlike forces of duty, I feel a little bit bereft having to put the pieces together myself, as it feels like the mystery is a hurricane that has completely engulfed me. The end feels very sad, but there is also beauty in the sadness. I mean, ultimately, what a crazy journey. I know that I'll be rewatching this series for years and years to come and theorising about it and probably changing my mind on what things mean from rewatch to rewatch. I don't know yet if I'll enjoy watching this one as much as the other two parts, and I say that because I think that after watching this return, that seasons 1 and 2 and Fire Walk with Me and The Return are almost 3 separate works of art and should be looked at separately, as well as a whole, but separately too. Only time will tell really if I enjoyed watching this more than the original series or more than Fire Walk with Me. This series has given me so much enjoyment, and it was a dream come true to see Agent Cooper again, and so many of the faces from the original Twin Peaks. I do feel like The Return ended as both a cliffhanger and as a definitive ending, and it's up to us to decide which one we want or which one we need. However, I'm pretty certain myself that there will be no more Twin Peaks, there won't be another season, and there won't be a movie. Mark Frost tweeted what sounded like a pretty definitive goodbye, thanking the fans for their dedication. And Showtime have also said that there are no negotiations in place for more seasons or anything else. It is pretty sad because at the end of that I am left feeling like I want more. I do want more. I want to thank everybody who has watched my reactions, my reviews, my theory videos, everyone who has left a comment, connected with me on social media, shared theories or their artwork or their dreams or their personal stories with me. It's been wonderful and so enjoyable. Right now I have no more plans for any more videos on the show. I honestly think there are so many ways to interpret the entire show now that I basically could actually do a video like every week until the end of time probably. But ultimately I think that it is a personal thing and that we should take from it what we want or what we need. I'm looking forward to discovering everyone's theories on it because I know that there will be a million of them out there. So I think that us Twin Peaks fans are going to be discussing this for a long time to come. I will hopefully be doing a review of Mark Frost's book, The Final Dossier, which comes out in October, and all my videos will remain up on my channel, including a rewatch I did of seasons 1 and 2 if you want to watch that. And I'll also still be on Twitter and at Facebook at The Vlog Lady if you want to connect with me in any way. Right now I'm going to go through this door and into another dimension. So see you at the curtain call.